welcome to another session on the best year of your life. And we're here today on our day focused on spirituality and consciousness. And I can't think of anybody I'd be more excited to have this conversation with than Dr. Michael B. Beckwith. Welcome, Dr. Beckwith. How are you?
Oh, it's my joy to be with you, Fleet, to talk about whatever we want to talk about, spirituality, consciousness. It's a great day, and I'm glad to be with you.
Great. Well, we're really happy to have you part of the summit. We're beyond happy. We're thrilled. And thank you so much for offering your time. So I'm going to share a bit of your bio, and then we'll jump into the conversation, okay?
Beautiful.
Great. So Dr. Michael B. Beckwith, Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, embraces a practical approach to spirituality, utilizing meditation, affirmative prayer, and life visioning, a process he originated. These practices teach us to take the experience of inner peace and awakened awareness into our everyday lives. In 2012, Dr. Beckwith addressed the UN General Assembly during its annual World Interfaith Harmony Week. A co-founder and president of the Association for Global New Thought, he hosts conferences featuring harbingers of world peace, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and had the distinguished honor of presenting to Nelson Mandela the Gandhi King Award. Dr. Beckwith is a sought-after meditation teacher, conference speaker, and seminar leader of the life visioning process. Three of his most recent books, Life Visioning, Spiritual Liberation, and Transcendent Dance Expanded, are recipients of the prestigious Nautilus Award. He has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Network's Super Soul Sunday, Super Soul Sessions, and Help Desk, Dr. Oz, CNN, The Oprah Show, Larry King Live, Tavis Smiley, and in his own PBS special, The Answer Is You. Dr. Beckwith is a member of Oprah's prestigious inaugural Super Soul 100, and Oprah has named his book Life Visioning in the top 15 books to solve a problem. Every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, thousands tune into his radio show on KPFK Wake Up, the Sound of Transformation. So again, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my absolute joy.
So our theme today on day 8 of the Best Year of Your Life Summit is spirituality and consciousness. And just to begin with, I'm wondering, what do those two terms mean to you? And also kind of what called you to the ministry and to serving as a spiritual teacher and guide for so many?
Thank you. Well, when I think about spirituality, of course, we can talk about this forever. But when we talk about spirituality is synonymous with that which is forever and that which is eternal. So every being is spiritual. Every being emerges from the eternal and continues to unfold, to reflect and to reveal the cosmos, to reflect and reveal the heart mind of the infinite. So when we deal with spirituality, we're talking about living a life that allows for us to be in conscious contact with our real nature so that it shows up on earth, that we're not trying to go and get spiritual. We're not going to be any more spiritual than we are at this particular moment, but we become more conscious of our spirituality. Now, when we use the word consciousness, all of us are pure consciousness, pure awareness. And then there's what is called content of consciousness. And oftentimes when people are unawake, let's say, they mistake the content for consciousness. Mm-hmm. Have opinions, points of view, moods that pass through, perceptions, positionalities. That's part of your content. Mm-hmm. The field of consciousness, in the field of your awareness. So in the beginning of awakening, you begin to be able to tell the difference between content and consciousness, just as the ocean is water, but it has content. It has seaweed, it has boats, it has pollution. But the ocean is not the content. We're not our content. We're pure consciousness, but we get snagged by content, and then the content produces perceptions, produces experience, and then people oftentimes are caught in the quagmire of their content. So I think that's just a quick answer of spirituality and consciousness, the way I see it.
Yeah, beautifully said. And being in touch with that unconditioned, eternal, timeless ground, it really makes a huge difference in our life, right? Having access to that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the game of awakening that we're playing, mm-hmm. to be able to transcend the personal mind, to transcend content identification. And it makes a tremendous ramifications in our life, because once you understand that you're not that which is passing through, not just as a belief system, but as a spiritual practice that leads to an encounter, the trajectory of your life changes. There's eminently more peace, there's a greater sense of well-being, a greater sense of less reactivity to circumstance, and more of a response to life. You become free.
Yeah, less fear, less basic anxiety about life. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So if you could share a little bit of the trajectory of your own journey, was it some kind of awakening that then brought you into the ministry, into serving as a spiritual guide, or was it you were always kind of headed that way and you've had various awakenings along the way, or what's kind of been your own trajectory?
Well, I think when I look back as a child, there were clues. I had experiences as a kid, but I didn't know what to name them. I didn't know what it was. I quickly sought to become normal. Whatever transcendent experience happened to me, I couldn't explain what was going on. So in seeking to become normal throughout my life, I was pretty much agnostic, atheistic, even going through the first couple of years of college at Morehouse College. And I was a part of an organization. Well, first of all, I founded the Harriet Tubman Prison Committee in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was in school there, and we were fighting for prison rights, and we worked with the Black Workers Congress, we worked with the Black Panther Party, so I was more of an activist. One day I was sitting in a meeting, and someone behind me said, "If you were to take over the world tomorrow, would the world be any different?" So when I looked around, there was nobody there. So we continued with the meeting, and then the next time the voice said it again, but it was coming from within me.
Wow.
"If you were to take over the world tomorrow, would the world be any different?" So I looked around the room and I could see the pathology of the beings in the room. One person was very territorial. One person was possessive. One person had to be right all the time. I looked at all of this and I realized, regardless of the philosophy and the ideology, if we were to take over, nothing would really change. And I never went back to that meeting. I enrolled in USC. I moved back to Los Angeles as a psychobiology major. I was on a track to go to medical school. And I began to have a series of inner experiences that at the time I labeled pathological. And I was hearing voices. I was having intense lucid dreams, visions, traveling. I didn't know what any of that was at the time. So I thought that something was wrong with me. It culminated in a lucid dream in which I was stabbed in the heart. These two men held me down, and another man stabbed me in the heart. I'm making this a short version here. And when I woke, and it was extremely painful. My heart, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, it was extremely painful, and I died. And when I woke up, I could see that we were surrounded by this presence of love and such beauty. The beauty was beyond description, and the love was beyond compare. I could never get back in the box again. And so my life began to be about what happened to me. And I began to bump into the great mystical sages of antiquity, Sri Aurobindo, Jesus the Christ, the Dhammapada. I began to read the Buddha. I began to read all the Bhagavad Gita to discover what had happened. And the opening continued. And then it, and I'll share this because I know that you spent some time in prison. At this time, attending USC, I was selling weed to help pay for my tuition. And I realized this was not my destiny. I stopped doing it, and I got busted on my last deal, very last deal. I told the guy I wasn't doing this anymore, and I got busted with like 100 kilos of marijuana, a bunch of guns, a whole lot of stuff. And the inner voice told me that I was going to walk free. People thought I was crazy. They said, when the locals are finished with you, you're going to have to do federal time for the guns. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm walking free. This is not my destiny at this time. People thought I'd lost my mind. So I was still in school. I was going to court. I was very uninterested in what was happening in the court. I was reading meditation books. Subsequently, the assistant to the attorney that I hired was interviewing a motorcycle cop and asking him why they'd come to my house. Now, the motorcycle cop, this is beyond the point, but the motorcycle cop wasn't even there. The warrant that they got was after the fact, but none of that mattered. Assistant said, why did you go to this man's house? And they said, well, the informant said a big drug deal was going on. We got a warrant. When we saw the drugs being delivered, we busted into the house. We arrested Mr. Beckwith, and there you have it. He jumped up and he said, that's hearsay evidence. We demand that the informant come and stand before the accused, or we demand that the case be thrown out of court. So the judge says, he called counsel to chambers and said, we need the informant to be here within 3 days. So we met 3 days later. The prosecutor said the informant is afraid for his life. He's not coming. And the judge said, Mr. Beckwith, I have no other recourse but to set you free. I hope I never see you in my courtroom again. I said, you never will. I walked out that day. I surrendered my life to the presence of God to be used as an instrument. I never looked back. And for a number of months, those police that followed me, they went to meditation retreats. They went to the Bodhi tree. They went to all manner of spiritual programs trying to catch me in something. But those days were gone, you see. And at that particular time in my life, I didn't think I was going to be a public person. I was really practicing meditation and coming into some kind of coherence with what was happening to me, integrating what was happening to me. And I had just a deep love affair with the source, a deep love affair with the presence. I didn't think I was going to be out and about speaking or anything like that. It was the furthest thing from my mind at the time. It was just over a period of time in which people gathered around me. They would come to get counsel from me, to get healings, to get teachings. I ended up becoming a spiritual therapist. I started my own retreats, workshops, seminars, and then I enrolled in the seminary in the School of Ministry. Not to become a minister, I just wanted to be in a higher conversation with people. I wanted to be in class. It took me 5 years to graduate from a 3-year program. And then the calling came upon me. I had to give up resistance to actually start a spiritual community. I did not want to do it, but my lucid dreams and all the inner guidance was literally compelling me to start a community, which ultimately I did. November the 30th, 1986, I launched my first public service. So Agape is now 35 years old, and we've been going strong ever since. So I've just given you a Cliff Note version of the unfoldment of what happened, you see.
So it's an amazing story, and I'd love to talk offline sometime because the parallels to my own story are pretty spooky. And it's I was putting myself through graduate school with dealing and long spiritual journey, but mixed up and all that stuff. I ended up actually doing 14 years, and I don't have any regrets because that was really part of my formation and who I am today.
Right.
I wouldn't have minded at the time if they had dropped my case, that's for darn sure. But anyway, that journey for me ended up being part of who I am today. So, you already went into the second question I had here, and that was that you did found Agape International, and Agape often is translated as unconditional love. And so we were talking about awakening and consciousness before, and that can be that world beyond the condition, beyond the self. And, it can sometimes be looked at as a kind of emptiness, not a voidness, but a kind of, beyond, but yet it's not really empty. There's an energy there. And I'm wondering, why you chose Agape as the name for your community and your ministry. It's got to have something to do with this quality of unconditional love.
Oh, absolutely. I'm keenly aware that we are on the planet. We've taken a human incarnation to perfect our loving. I mean, this is why we are here, to actually grow in love and kindness and compassion, to actually not allow that to be merely a belief system or something that's in a Bible or a spiritual textbook, but to actually live that. And so I was greatly influenced by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I met him as a small boy, like 9 years old, at Holman's Methodist Church when he was on a West Coast speaking tour, raising money for SCLC. And then subsequently, I can remember hearing him speak about agape love. And he described it as the love of God operating in the human heart. And so when I was doing my seminar work, the name of the seminars was Agape Transformationals. Agape, unconditional love, and transformational. I was inspired by Malcolm X, who had gone to prison, had a great transformation, and came out a different being. So I combined it and called it Agape Transformationals. And then when I started Agape, I just took the name Agape because I do still believe that we're here to perfect our loving. And as you've indicated, it's sometimes translated as emptiness when you study the Buddhist text. Mm-hmm. But there is no emptiness anywhere. It's a fullness of life. It's a fullness of beauty. It's a fullness of intelligence, even though it can't be caught by the sensorium. The eyes may not be able to see it. The ears may not be able to hear it. But the eyes and the ears are prosthetics of a spiritual faculty that allows us to see with consciousness. So we begin to see the fullness of beauty and of life and of love everywhere. And that each of us are luminous beings. And some people have a ceiling on their love. Some people are ignorant of it. But it's still within us. So we're here to awaken to that and to allow it to be the activity of our awareness. So I took Agape because I was inspired by Dr. King, and that's what we're seeking to do as a community. When we visioned Agape back in 85, and then birthed it in 86, we embraced a vision. We wanted to be the next iteration of human consciousness. We wanted to be the next unfoldment of evolution of the human species. That was a very bold and big statement, but we embraced it, and we know that's to be the tip of the spear of transformation and loving. You see, yeah.
And I know along the way you've taken what I think you use the term trans-denominational approach, and I know your work involves meditation, affirmative prayer, and a process you call life visioning. I'm wondering if you could talk about just your overall approach to the spiritual journey and how you guide people and what you offer to people in terms of the things that they actually do to develop themselves and evolve into realizing that these qualities of awakening and agape and so forth.
Absolutely. As you indicated, with trans-denominational, the word trans means to go beyond, and we go beyond denominations. We know that this presence, by whatever name we call it, love, beauty, intelligence, life itself, is infinite, so it can't fit into a denomination. And so we're beyond denominations. We're beyond religiosity. We practice meditation to catch insight and revelation into truth, so that beyond denominations, we want to know what is real and eternal, and allow that to be active in us. So meditation is our foundation piece. That's the foundation. Affirmative prayer, we practice affirmative prayer. We fall in love with praying, not begging or beseeching a reluctant deity somewhere. But prayer is what allows us to work on ourselves, to have a realization of that which is so, the suchness of life, the isness of life, the abundance, the joy, everything that's already here, even though it might be covered up by experience, might be covered up by time, it might be covered up by perception, it's here. So prayer allows us to actually realize that which we're praying for is already here. We just have to remove the obscurations from the mind to see it. And life visioning is the step beyond visualization. Visualization is like beginning steps of metaphysics. You visualize something you want, you feel that you have it, you have a certain kind of an emotional and psychological bond with it, you describe it, you articulate it, you hold that space, and then, it may begin to come into manifestation. But visioning is different. Visioning is saying that there's something already within us that might even be beyond our present paradigm of what we could visualize. And then what we're doing is putting ourselves in a position in a meditative protocol to ask certain questions, to allow that which is within us to begin to come forward, to begin to guide and direct us, to begin to come into our awareness. So we can ask a question such as, what is it that's trying to emerge in my life right now? What gift do I have to share? Using the word God, knowing that God is not a man in the sky, but a presence that's never an absence. What's God's idea of itself as my life? Visioning is inviting that which is intrinsic to come forth and begin to come into our awareness. We begin to ask, what is it that we need to become in order for this vision to manifest? We ask, what do we already have within our consciousness? What can we get rid of? It's a series of questions given in a meditative state so that we begin to cull from our own being why we came to this planet. So if you imagine an avocado seed doing a vision process, it would see an avocado tree. If an acorn would do the vision process, it would see an oak tree. When we do a vision process, we begin to catch something about us that wants to come forward. So we use meditation, affirmative prayer, life visioning, sacred service. We want to put ourselves in a position of sacred service, study, fellowship, doing inner work around forgiveness in order to be great instruments to do the work that we're called to do on the planet, you see. Yeah.
So I get the sense the style of meditation you all work and the affirmative prayer, there's others. I would imagine there's some stillness and quiet aspect, and as well as a more expressive, maybe the prayer more expressive. And I really like what it's, and I recognize the influences from Sri Aurobindo and other traditions about
Yes.
and Buddhism with a more non-dual approach where, it's already there, right? It's what we're really allowing what's already there to arise.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, one of my teachers that greatly influenced me was Sri Aurobindo. I went to Oroville, I went to India. His work influenced me greatly. Dr. Howard Washington Thurman influenced me. Walter Russell, one of the great mystics that emerged out of America, influenced me. These were great influences, particularly when I was waking up, because I didn't have a teacher, so I didn't know what was happening to me. So all my teachers were dead, and so they influenced me from the other side. So there's a great degree of stillness. As a matter of fact, every Sunday I do the Way of Meditation service. It's at 6:45 a.m. I give a 10-15 minute Dharma talk, and then we practice meditation, and it's still. And it's a very large service. People from all over the world tune into it. And then the next two services are more celebrative and worship with music and all of that. But the first service is a meditation service. And then we have a meditation service at 8:30 and a meditation service at 11 that precedes the main services. So meditation is built into the fabric of our community. It's most important.
And so you have the local community that attends in person there in LA. And is this also broadcast? Because I know Agape is very much an international community.
Yeah, and during the last couple of years, obviously, with this lockdown of healthy people, it's totally broadcast around the world. So we're in 80 countries right now.
Wow.
Last time we checked, we have people from 80 countries tuning in. I think last year there was a leap where over 1 million people started tuning into us. They found us. A lot of people found us during the lockdown. Now, there was a lot of people even before the lockdown that were tuning in because we were live streaming. But during this last couple of years, it's increased. So even when people could come to Agape, the sanctuary holds 1,900 people. We have 3 services. The last 2 services were pretty packed. Most of the people were still online, you see, and so it's still obviously true today. Yeah.
So one way to think about today on the summit is, it's really about our spiritual journey, whatever that means to any one of us, and our spiritual evolution, our spiritual growth as human beings. And so I'm curious as to your sense of how do we know if we're growing spiritually? What are there signposts along the way? What are some of you could think about, well, I'm becoming more mature, I'm growing emotionally, lots of ways, but the sense that I'm actually evolving spiritually, how do we get a sense of that?
I think what happened, we do spiritually mature, and we find ourselves less reacting to circumstances and conditions determinate of our moods. We are aware, we become more aware of that sense of peace that arises, that sense of love is actually independent of a condition. And we're able to hold that even when plans don't go our way. We're quicker to forgive. We're quicker to act from a sense of compassion. We're quicker to act from a sense of generosity. These are signposts along the way. It's not just, how much stuff you get in the world, how much you acquire in the world, because that may not be your particular lot to have a lot of stuff, but you notice that your joy is not dependent on an external circumstance. That's a very high state of consciousness, that you can have a sense of joy, and it's not based upon whether somebody likes you or whether a plan turned out the way you wanted it to turn out in the world of phenomena. These are great signs along the way. And the peace is not a pretense. It's not acting spiritual. It's not acting peaceful. There's a real sense of peace that happens. And even though it's not normal, particularly during this particular time of great intensity, there's less anxiety, there's less anxiousness, there's less fear, there's less worry. Even though you're in the same world that everyone else is in, your response to it is a little different. You're not sublimating your emotions, you're not bypassing, but you're in tune with something. And you just see life through a different perception, you see. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Yeah, I had certainly had many experiences of joy, happiness, even ecstasy in my life going along, but it was actually in prison when I began through practice to develop an abiding sense of joy and peace in prison, where there's really nothing obvious to be happy about, right? The conditions aren't something to be happy about at all, but to be able to, through practice and spiritual work, have that sense of abiding joy that wasn't related to the external circumstances. It really gives you a profound sense of confidence in something.
Right, and because you can do that, we're regular guys, you know what I mean? And because you can do that, and because I can do that, anybody can do that.
Absolutely.
With the level of practice. You reminded me of someone that used to attend Agape. Did you ever meet, you know who Clarence Chance is?
What's the name?
Clarence Chance.
No, I don't know him.
He's an individual who spent 17 years in prison, and he spent 17 years in prison for a crime he didn't do. And he eventually got out with the Innocence Project. But he was in prison, and someone tossed a book by Krishnamurti onto his bed one day, or he found it there, and he ended up reading. He was just waiting for the cavalry to arrive any moment. This is America. I'm innocent. I know I'm going to get out any moment. And 1 year turned into 5 years turned into 10. Anyway, he read the book and he began to do spiritual practice. And in around the 12th year, he became free. He was free in prison. Yeah. And then subsequently, he learned how to play instruments. He learned art. He developed himself into a very artistic being. And then eventually, he was freed physically. And I remember when he came to Agape, he was saying that on his way to Agape, he saw this car accident and these people almost fighting over bent metal. And it was blowing his mind how these people were fighting over bent metal on a car. They were both okay. Nobody was hurt. It was just the car was a little banged up, and they were about to go to blows over it. And he was aware that they were imprisoned. They were more imprisoned than the people in prison. And then he saw people at Agape rushing to get to meditation service, and they were stepping on flowers, stepping over these flower beds to get to the meditation service. And he saw, all of this unfreedom in free people. And I remember he spoke to that when he came to Agape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's many who have actually found freedom in prison, and many don't. Sadly, it can be terrible places, but many have. And there's something about that. Many of our Summit audience here have probably been practicing meditation for decades. But I hope there's quite a number of audience that they may just be thinking about turning towards the spiritual dimension of their lives. Maybe they've been really busy with life and livelihood and parenting and what have you, and they're just really thinking about wanting to open up to that dimension of life, or start a spiritual practice, or enter a spiritual path, or try to find a teacher, or these kind of things. And I'm wondering what guidance you would have for somebody that's just kind of beginning to start. Now, I don't know whether this comes early on, but one of those awakenings is when you actually see that you're in a prison, even out in the free world, right? That's one of those early awakenings. But how could somebody get started? What kind of guidance would you offer?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I love what you just said, because that's the beginning when you actually realize you're asleep. Mm-hmm. I guess it was Heidegger that talked about the fact that a blind man that knows he's blind mm-hmm. can easily more walk around the world. But if a blind man doesn't know he's blind, he gets into a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. So Jesus had a statement, I not only have come to allow people who are blind to see and people who are deaf to hear, but I've come to make people who see blind and people who hear deaf. In other words, mm-hmm. I've come to eradicate, the way you're looking at the world so that you can actually see. So, once we realize that we are in some kind of mental, psychological, emotional prison, sometimes it happens through pain, then we can begin. We begin our process. And I would say that when we begin the process, we begin with an intention. Intention is like a rudder. It gives us some kind of direction. Of course, we all know the byproducts of meditation in terms of heart coherence and brain coherence and blood pressure and there's a lot of good benefits physically from meditation. But I think spiritually, when we have an intention, when we sit, we establish an intention to wake up. It's that intention to have a realization, an insight into our real nature. So we start with intention, and then we take our attention and we embrace our intention. And after a while, the intention becomes like an inner feeling tone. And every time you sit down, that intention is there, even if you don't verbalize it. And then from that, I often teach that you sit as if somebody's about to tell you something very important. So there's a whole availability, a whole listening that's beyond the ears, beyond the eyes. And then you sit, even if you are a veteran or if you're just beginning, you sit always as if this is your very first time. And so I think if you bring those particular elements, intention, attention, a soulful availability, and this is my first time, and you have some modicum of practice every single day to the best of your ability. If you don't do it, you don't beat yourself up that you missed a day. You just start again. Something begins to happen. You begin to clear away the film. Your perceptual windows begin to be clear, and sometimes you'll have an insight into reality, an aha moment into that which is real. So there's a movement of a slow process of cleaning the filter, and then there's sometimes a dramatic satori moment of seeing like you've never seen before, but it just ebbs and flows like that. And the intention gets stronger. The practice becomes a part of your habit. So it's like brushing your teeth. It's like taking a shower. It's just your inner shower that you do on a daily basis. You don't feel like doing it. You do it anyway, even if it's for a few moments. And then you notice as months and years go by, There's something about you that's different. There's something about you that's left behind. And there's something about you that's being polished. And as you asked earlier, you start to notice that you're a little different. Things that used to bother you, you may not prefer them, but they don't bother you as much, you see, because you're touching something within yourself that's eternal and real. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, Michael. So, yeah, you just gave us a profound and classic instruction in basic mindfulness and awareness meditation, intention, setting the clarity of intention, then bringing attention, and then the attitudinal qualities of that attention, right? And, you mentioned Suzuki Roshi's classic beginner's mind, right? You sit down with that beginner's mind, right?
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. So I really invite people to come back to that again and again, because that was it right there. That's the core of meditation training right there. What about the community aspect? What about the fellowship? I know that's a big part of Agape. So what, in terms of our journey, finding, like-minded, people we can take that journey with, or just, some would argue that the real expression of any real spiritual evolution really shows up in the relational field. That's the only place you can really see it. How are we with others, right? How do we show up in the world? And so a lot of times the field of our practice, we got to do that internal individual work. But another important field of the practice can be the community, right? So I'm curious about that for you, because obviously I know that's been a big part of your journey.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even the Buddha talks about the Sangha, the community and the community. I've said over the years that community ultimately grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. That when you're in a community of people who are practicing, there's a rich field of insight that occurs. And when anyone has an insight in that field, it has a tendency to draw everyone into that particular insight, even without language, without verbalizing it. If you're in the field itself, that particular local noosphere, mental atmosphere can affect everyone. And as you've indicated, it gives us a lot of practice, because in the relational field, that's where you practice your forgiveness. You practice your generosity, you practice your compassion, you practice your honesty, you practice, articulation, conversation. If you're sitting on a mountaintop by yourself, how do you know if in fact you've stabilized around a particular state of consciousness? You go visit your family, you come into spiritual community, you enter into some kind of relational dynamic, and then you're able to see, oh, did I really stabilize around a non-reactivity? Did I really stable around loving? Or was that just a fleeting moment? Did I really embody it? So the community gives us a place of embodying an insight, and it gives us a place of practice, and it gives us a place of loving intentionality. And also, people get to see when they come that they're not alone, that there are other people that used to be outliers, where people thought they were weird. You see, there's a whole bunch of weirdos here that are playing together, praying together, healing together, doing sacred service together, and it's a level of comfort to know that, there are other people that playing the same game of awakening as you are, and we play together, we have fun together. It's an interesting dynamic.
Well, I want to ask you in a moment about, you mentioned sacred service a couple of times, so I want to ask you about that. But first of all, I'd like to ask you about the role of mentorship, guidance, teachers. You had a lot of spiritual experiences early on in your life, and you didn't know what they were. You even assumed maybe they were pathological at one point. And so people may start having, if they're doing the work, they may start having various kinds of meditative experiences or various things. And, it could end up being some kind of bypassing, or they could, just develop attachment around things and turn them into something that they're not. If we don't have good guidance, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs that we can drift off into on the journey. So I'm wondering if you could talk about the importance of some kind of guidance, mentorship on the spiritual journey.
I think it's very important. And I think that today, when I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, a lot of what was happening would be looked upon as fringe. You know what I mean? And today, the word meditation, compassion, introspection, they pretty much have come into our nomenclature, part of our language now. You go to the internet, you can see all kinds of people. Not all of them have embodied the truth. But you can see the teachings pretty much everywhere. And so I think it's a lot easier for people now to actually, find someone that is honest, find somebody that has a good spiritual practice. And mentorship is very important because it can keep people from going down those cul-de-sacs that you've described. People can have an insight. They can go to their ego. They can think they're the only one, they're the chosen one or something, you know what I mean? Because of a particular insight that they're having. And if you're in a community and there's some spiritual guidance, it can keep you from going down those particular paths of thinking, of allowing the ego. What people don't understand, the ego will steal your insight in a nanosecond. Mm-hmm. And you'll think I, me, rather than realizing that you're a connection to a presence that's everywhere, and everyone has equal access to this presence, you see. And so I think being in a community and having some kind of mentorship allows you to navigate through those little egoic pockets.
Yeah.
That can be a delay, because the ego doesn't want you to go into the realm of the unknown and wants you to stay within a little comfort zone of your little identity. And
well, there's no job for the ego in the unknown, so it gets a little nervous about that. Yeah. My first teacher coined the term spiritual materialism was with that small self, that false self, they will co-opt anything and everything to its own ends, right? Spiritual experiences, anything, right? Yeah, absolutely. So what about sacred service? You've referenced it a couple of times. What role does that play? What do you mean by it? What role does it play in your community and on the spiritual journey?
Well, it's part of karma yoga. I think that first of all, service to somebody else is a remedy for depression. When you begin to give of service, the depression becomes expression, and there's an energy that flows. So you get the benefit of giving and sharing. And so it's a path of awakening, being of service. And then what happens is the sense of separation ultimately breaks down, and you're not serving other. The sense of separation ultimately breaks down, and you realize there's no other, that we're all united in this great field of love and beauty and intelligence. And you're serving that part of yourself that's having an incarnation as another being. So it assists you in breaking down the sense of separation. It assists you in waking up. So I think service is a great path. So all of that is a part of our community. We have what is called a Sacred Service Saturday, where every year the community goes out and we volunteer in all the nonprofits in the area, just giving of our service, our time, our money, etc. And many people then stick in those particular communities and become their volunteers out of our community. And then it expanded globally, where people were doing sacred service all around the world, finding a place to be of service. And then it expands, not just one day of the week, not one day of the year, but just finding a place to be of service to someone other than yourself as a way of life. And the feedback that we get from people in terms of their mental and emotional hygiene and the coming out of self-centeredness, is monumental on the path. So it's a part of our path. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think that's a healthy way for anyone who's looking for a spiritual community. And, it's one thing to look for. Are they engaged in service? Is there something beyond, just the individualism? And what role does service play in that community? I think that's really an important thing to look at. So this summit, we did the first one this past January of 2021. And it was meant to be an alternative to, the idea of New Year's resolutions, which had the data on those is very dismal. People, we run from them as soon as we make them. Something like 5 or 6% of people follow through. And we thought we had some understanding about why that is. And so this summit was meant to really give people what they need in terms of the inspiration, the science, the understanding, the insights, to really move forward in their lives and whatever domains of their life they'd like to move forward in. And yet, we started this in the middle of the pandemic. And, here we are again. And, we're talking about love and unconditional love and agape. We're talking about awakening and spiritual journey. We're talking about connecting with a mindset of abundance and possibility. And yet, we're and connectedness. And yet we're at a time of increasing disconnection. And so many people are experiencing a sense of profound scarcity and fear and anxiety, not only with the pandemic, but also with, the emerging climate emergency and or that's already here, and, increasing divisiveness here in our country and all around the world. And, you started off as an activist, and, that work is not finished. And activism is really important. We have a lot of justice work yet to do. And yet sometimes that ends up, being wrapped up in personalities and aggression and anger. And, I love Dr. King talked about the need to balance love and power, that love without power, I think he said, is anemic, and power without love is destructive or something like that. And so, we're in a really, I think, a rough time right now. And so how do you square that? The idea of let's all get in community and find, deep inner direction and abundance together versus while the world seems to be on some level burning down around us.
Right.
Maybe that's an overly negative view, but it is a challenging time.
Well, I think that there's two ways that I definitely encounter that. One is, as you indicated, people all over the world are going through changes. There are climate issues, there are tornadoes, there's tsunamis, there's drought, there's war-torn areas where people are scavenging for food and safety and protection. So I tell people, one, if you can be in spiritual practice and you can be in sacred service, then you must, for those who can't. If you can, you must. You must stand in proxy for the individuals right now who are scavenging for food. They're not thinking about spiritual awakening. They don't have time to think about for spiritual awakening because a bomb has just dropped in their backyard, or their country just got occupied by an aggressive country, or a tornado has just hit. So because we can, we must do it. So I let people know that, we have to infuse into the mental atmosphere these insights that we're having, so that there is progress in humankind based on the seeds that we're planting based on our spiritual work. So we don't do work for our just our little selves, navel gazing for ourselves. We're doing our work for the evolution of our species, you see. And then I let people know that, one, the universe, which is the outpicturing of the heart mind of the infinite, is progressive. It's, even when there's a little contraction, it always expands. It's always expanding to reflect and reveal the infinite nature of the presence, so that injustice, dictatorship, all of this that becomes stagnant around might makes right, racism, bigotry, ignorance, can't last forever. Even if people are using metaphysical laws to do negative things, life is not going to work against itself. So the way I look at it is, and the way when I look at history, when I look at present moment, whenever there's great stagnation and great negativity, and the universe is always progressing, that means that there's a radical tension between what's trying to emerge and then the elements that are trying to hold it back. It creates a kind of a slingshot effect, which means at some point that energy is going to be released, and we're going to move through a renaissance. And there's going to be a release of energy. And I think the great indigenous cultures have prophesied times like this, in which an old paradigm is dying and a new paradigm is being born. However, those that control the media are only reporting from an old paradigm. They're reporting from fear, doubt, worry, lack, limitation, scarcity, hate, separation, polarity. We are the ones that are beginning to report from possibility and the new paradigm. And so when that energy shifts, that energy is going to move through individuals who've been doing the inner work, and they have the capacity to hold more wattage. Just like there's electricity everywhere, but you can't see it. unless you have a microphone. You can't hear it unless you have a microphone. You can't see it unless you have, lights, luminosity, a light bulb. But the presence is everywhere. But it's going to flow through individuals who are doing the work and are being prepared. Because no, peace doesn't roll in. As Dr. King said, peace does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but it rolls in on the backs of those who tirelessly hold hands with possibility. Of course, I'm creating my own way of saying that. So when I look upon what's happening right now, I know we're in a great sea change. The media is telling us they're reporting from the old. You and I are trying to report from the new. We're trying to get people ready to hold more wattage. So as the slingshot is released and the energy seeks to catch up with the progress of the universe and the progress of Mother Earth, who's vibrating higher than she's ever vibrated before, it's going to come through us. We're going to build a whole new way of living, giving, sharing, shining, glowing, compassion, generosity. And so, yes, it looks bleak, but life, what I know for sure, and what's been shown to me, is that life and love always wins, because life doesn't work against itself. So you can have potentates and people, billionaires trying to do whatever they're trying to do, controlling people, whatever the case may be. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. That which is against life is not sustainable. And eventually it crumbles. And so we have to hold this, we have to do our work so well that we become, even before it manifests, we have to become the energy of that which is trying to emerge. You see, so that's kind of where I hold it. That's where I hold it. If we can do the work, we must do the work. And we're in a great sea change. Yeah.
Well, you said so many amazing things there, and that's such a profound vision. And I love the idea that life, in the long run, life is not going to work against itself. And I get the sense that we're not meant to stand back and watch that either. You're calling us to participate. Life is calling us to participate in life, not working against itself.
I'm still an activist. I'm still, I'm not, but I'm a spiritual activist.
Yeah.
Which means I'm not going to allow what I'm against to be bigger than what I'm for.
Right.
You see, yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you said about carrying more wattage. And in my own Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we call that lungta, and it's basically life force energy. And part of our spiritual work is to grow so we can hold more energy and transmit more energy and hold that and participate in that process of that increase. And that takes the work that we're all called to do. So, wow, this has been really beautiful, and I'm sure it's going to stimulate a lot of creative thinking and journeying for our summit participants. So thank you very much, Michael Bernard Beckwith. Wish you all the best. Thank you for honoring your own spiritual journey all the way to where you've been able to help millions of people, and thank you for the work you continue to do.
Hey, Fleet, thank you for being you, and thank you for everything you went through to be you and to spread the good word. Appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you too. Thank you very much.